I had worked the sheet 9 days alone, and given it to no one, wishing to spill no wind on the homeward run. But while I slept, the crew began to parley. Silver and gold they guessed were in that bag bestowed on me by Aeolus' great heart. These fucking guys. Temptation had its way with my companions, and they untied the bag. Then every wind roared into a hurricane. The ships went pitching west with many cries. Our land was lost. Roused up, despairing in that gloom, I thought, should I go overside for a quick finish? That's crazy. He said, should I fucking kill myself right now?
I left that in there just for you, Jack. I debated cutting it, and I was like, nah, he's gotta read this.
This is a
Hello, and welcome to Notes from the Oracle. I'm Connor, and together with Jack, my co-host from Cabin 6, we're going into uncharted waters as we explore the monstrous mythology of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Book 2, The Sea of Monsters. Chapter 10, We Hitch a Ride with Dead Confederates. Which, I'll put it out there, I think this was perhaps a chapter title for the next chapter, but then something better came up for that chapter, given that we really won't talk about them for more than like a paragraph, a sentence maybe.
Yeah, Rick jumped the gun with this. This is the wrong chapter title. Once
I
again,
agree.
happening a lot with this book.
Yeah, it feels like there was something he could have done with Monster Donut here. And I don't mean to keep berating on the it feels like there's something he could have done with X for the chapter title. But come on, man, Monster Donut?
I agree. I was shocked that this was the chapter that Monster Donut was introduced. And we'll get to my actual thoughts once we get to that part of the chapter. We're on the same page. I got to that section and said, why the fuck is the chapter not relating to this?
It
Why?
should be.
It makes no sense.
It's also the most important thing that happens in the chapter for the most part.
Yeah.
So, which weird world lore implications. But
It
we'll
is.
get to that because before we get there, this chapter starts out with it is picking up right where the last chapter left off. In case you have forgotten, they have just escaped from, is it Aureus? Yeah, they've escaped from Aureus specifically while Agrius stayed back with Luke. And they've jumped on a lifeboat on the side of the Princess Andromeda. Percy has cut the ropes and they started plummeting toward the ocean. And that's where last chapter ended. So this chapter picks up with Percy yelling, "Thermos!" as they hurtle toward the water. So it dumps you right into the action.
Yeah. And this next little bit is cool. It's a cool little segment. There's a lot that happens in this chapter, and it goes by pretty quickly. And again, I'm sure during our chapter recap, we'll touch on it. I feel like it does a good job because we do cover quite literally a lot of ground, but it all feels properly sequential and nothing really sticks out. So I was surprised, granted, we're about halfway through the book, at how soon into the quest they're using the thermos. It's neat to see it, and it makes sense that they use it now.
Yep. I will agree, though. This is one of the things that I had forgotten about going into this book was how they used this item. And now I know why I forgot how they used this item, because it's pretty boring. It is pretty underwhelming, and funny enough, we'll be talking about its parallel in the myth section today, and why I think this actually makes some sense. But in many ways, it's also used very differently than its parallel, which to me makes it come across in this weird space of oh, you could have gotten a lot more creative with how you used this, right? And so I don't mind this, but to me, it was very forgettable. That it's and Hermes gave us this uber magic thermos with wind trapped inside. Whee! Okay,
Yeah.
we're done.
And pretty much. I mean, that is what happens, but Rick does a good job of flavoring it to be interesting. Percy is screaming as they're midair falling towards the ocean, just straight down. He screams for the thermos. Annabeth thinks he's insane, goes, "What?" and she's holding on the boat straps for her life, and her hair is flying straight up. I like it's described straight up like a torch. But
Mhm.
Tyson, he's on it. Whatever fears that Percy might have had that Tyson would not act in a pinch, gone. At this point
Gone.
in time, gone. He understood the assignment immediately. He, big, clumsy Tyson, dexterous enough to open up Percy's duffel bag and take out the magic thermos without losing grip on the boat. There are arrows and javelins that are like whistling past them. This is high stakes, and
Mhm.
Tyson is he is properly the MVP during this.
Absolutely. Even just reading that, he's doing like 3 things at once while falling through the air. No chance that any, like, mortal person could do that. And on top of that, I feel like it above and beyond just demonstrating his capability in a stressful situation, it shows either or both his implicit trust in Percy that he's like, "All right, I know what Percy's doing," or that he himself, in the same way that Percy has this, like, being on the ocean innate sense of, like, "Oh, we need to do this," some level of extra Poseidon magic going on as well. One or both.
I think he is simply built like that. I think
Mhm.
he was just simply locked in because it continues. Percy, he gets the thermos from Tyson. He's like, I hope I'm using this right. Commands him, hang on. Annabeth is screaming back, I am hanging on. Percy says, tighter. Like, I promise you, it's not tight enough right now. And Percy hooks his feet under the boat's inflatable bench. And Tyson, without being commanded to, grabs Annabeth and Percy by the backs of the shirts as he hooks himself into the boat as well. He is securing them. This plan, I truly
Mhm.
believe, would not work if Tyson were not there as an anchor for them to stay in place because
Absolutely.
Percy opens up the thermos, he opens a quarter turn, and instantly, it's described, instantly, a white sheet of wind jetted out of the thermos and propelled us sideways, turning our downward plummet into a 45-degree crash landing. And they just start
Go.
zooming. The wind seems to laugh as it shot from the thermos. I thought that was a neat little addition.
Yes.
Percy said it was like it was glad to be free.
All of the description here I thought was really good, and it's not, like, doing anything particularly impressive, nor is it got,
Mhm.
like, the usual kind of Rick-isms, like the way that the Minotaur was described with pencil sharpener sharpened points, and you're like, "Wow, that's good." This is just like, yeah, I can see it, I can picture it, and that's a cool plan. I love the image of the boat shooting downward from the Princess Andromeda, and that Percy catches he heard a wail of outrage from the ship behind us, but we were already out of weapon range, and eventually it fades to the size of a white toy boat in the distance.
Yeah, I mean, even just you skipped over the part that I would say is a kind of a Rickism, where he says, they hit the ocean, they bump once, twice, skipping like a stone, and then they were whizzing along like a speedboat, salt spray in their faces, and nothing but sea ahead. Again,
Mhm.
it's very simple. He's not doing anything revolutionary, but yep, skip once, twice, like a stone. Like, got it.
Yeah.
I know exactly what's happening.
But just like that, they are removed from the danger. And there's a break in the page, and now they're thinking about next steps. It says, as we raced over the sea, Annabeth and I tried to send an iris message to Chiron. It was important we let somebody know what Luke was doing, and we didn't know who else to trust. And Jack, we give Chiron a lot of shit, but I actually thought this was a surprisingly good point. Because say what we will about Chiron and his misdeeds, but as immortal trainer of heroes, one of the things that he is most dependable for is being on the side of heroes, and at the very least, acting in a way that he believes will benefit heroes, even if he is not succeeding. He is trustworthy, and I
Yes.
think that might be part of, at least in my mind, what influenced my childhood vision of, "Oh, Chiron's so cool, he can never do anything wrong." That was
Uh-huh.
just so incorrect, but, like, I think these are the moments why, right? When everything else hits the fan, you want that one person that you can turn to and just be like, "Hey, I just need someone else to know the world is ending right now." Okay, that's it. You just needed to know that.
Yeah, he is a constant. Whether or not his constance is helpful, that's up for debate, but he is always there in some capacity. You are right.
I mean, there and I guess my point was that he is there and trusted. But either way, it's not like he's gonna do much good in this chapter because of course he's not.
Mhm.
So, all of that's a moot point, I guess. Jack is right, I am wrong.
I mean, we'll get to that in a second. Again, we get Rick being creative. They
Mhm.
are skimming along the top of the ocean. The winds from the thermos are still blowing them, and they're stirring up a really nice sea spray. And what does that sea spray make? A rainbow in the sunlight, which is perfect for an iris message.
I did like that. I thought that was quite clever.
That's just good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So with that, they pay the price, they toss in a golden drachma, they pray to Iris, and they hope that they shall be shown Chiron. And Percy says, his face appeared all right, but there was some sort of weird strobe light flashing in the background and rock music blaring like he was at a dance club. Which, I don't know, man. Maybe this was the early 2000s, but I don't know what kind of dance club plays rock music.
Yeah, especially he's in Miami, right?
Yeah.
I was gonna say it should be like club or techno or like EDM.
Yeah, it's specifically this is Miami in 2006, 2007.
Mhm.
Dog, they're playing, like, "Party in the USA" by Miley Cyrus, and
That is adorable that that's what you think is playing in the Miami clubs.
I don't know, I was gonna say something by, like, Big Sean.
Yeah, man, you got it.
Yeah,
Oh my god, yep. Yep, so they're listening to Miley Cyrus and Big Sean,
yeah,
and,
alright, cool, I'm glad we're on the same page.
yep, we sure are, and I gotta move on from that. I'm gonna get stuck in the giggle hole if we don't keep it pushing. Oh, man. You're the salt of the earth, Connor. But they tell them they do their best. They tell Chiron about Luke and the Princess Andromeda and they say the golden box, but the golden coffin, the sarcophagus that had Kronos' remains. But they're running into a problem, which is the noise on Chiron's end and the rushing wind and the water on their end is causing a little bit of interference. They're not really sure how much is actually intelligible and what is being ascertained. And
Yep.
so Chiron is yelling back, Percy, you have to watch out for. And then his voice gets drowned out by loud shouting behind him. There's a bunch of voices whooping and hollering. And Percy yells, What? Chiron says, Curse my relatives. He ducks a plate that's flying over his head and shattering somewhere. He looks back and he says, Annabeth, you shouldn't have let Percy leave camp. But if you do get the fleece, and then somebody shouts, Yeah, baby. And somebody else yells, Woohoo! And the music gets cranked up even louder. Subwoofers are making it so loud that even the boat is starting to vibrate. And Chiron just starts screaming at the top of his lungs, Miami! Miami! I'll try to keep watch. And unfortunately, the Misty screen gets smashed apart, like someone on the other side had thrown a bottle at it, which they probably did, and Chiron vanishes.
Dude, it's like
Now
a bad 3D show at an amusement park.
uh-huh. Yeah,
That's
that's a
it.
great way to put it. Chiron is trying to be helpful. Maybe I just hate centaurs, man.
I get it. Truly, he tried to say something useful on 3 separate occasions, and we miss out only on the useful information each time. That's crazy, and also lazy. Come on, Rick.
Here's the thing, man. Could he not just take it outside? Could he not be like, "Give me a second," and, like, go somewhere a little bit more quiet?
Is that rainbow gonna be there a while? Can you call me back in 2 minutes?
I guess, yeah, does it not just follow the person being called? I would assume it has to, because if it wasn't stuck in space, well, I
Um,
guess they have the rainbow following them, so I don't know.
yeah, and we know based on last book that they specifically ask for Chiron. but Chiron has to go deal with campers, so they end up getting Luke when they're calling him from the car wash in Denver.
Mm.
Then again, I think they call the big house, so maybe
Yes.
it's because they called a location and not a person. We'll have to
Right.
look out for future instances of mobile iris messages.
Hmm. I will say, despite my glibness and apparent just hate for centaurs, it's a fun section. It's funny.
Yep. It doesn't do much. It continues moving us forward, and we get the requisite, well, we tried to ask for
Yes.
for an adult's help.
Uh-huh.
Didn't get very far, but now we can at least say, "Hey, why are these children dealing with this?" Well, because they tried and they failed to get help from an adult. Sure.
Absolutely. Bingo. And that's the most important thing. So
Yep.
I'll give it a pass.
But with that, we can now continue moving on, and Percy says an hour later we spotted land, a long stretch of beach lined with high-rise hotels. And it's actually Annabeth who knows where this is, just based on instinct. She's been here before. She says, "That's Virginia Beach." Oh my gods! How did the Princess Andromeda travel so far overnight? And then we get another one of Percy's cool nautical powers as he says, she's like, "That's like," and he goes, 530 nautical miles. She just goes, "How did you know that?" And Percy says, I'm not sure." And then Annabeth, I love this. First of all, Percy, you're not sure? Sure, man. You know what? I'm not even going to belabor you with the Percy is dumb comment.
Hmm.
Annabeth clearly puts it together, and I thought this was very fun. She says, "Percy, what's our position?" And without knowing why he knows or how to say it, he says 36 degrees, 44 minutes north, 76 degrees, 2 minutes west. And he goes, "Whoa, how did I know that?" And Annabeth is like, "Because of your dad. You have perfect bearings when you're at sea. That is so cool." Which
It
I
is
think it
cool.
is. Yeah.
Uh-huh. She's right. And of course it would be Annabeth, that fucking dweeb, that's like, he can do all this other stuff. But man, being able to perfectly locate where you are like a GPS when you're in the ocean, that's the coolest.
It is so Annabeth coded of her, but also it just again falls into one of those small niche powers that I'm like, yeah, that is cool. I
Hmm.
appreciate that. I hope that when we get to like seeing Jason do stuff in the Heroes of Olympus, that at some point we get to know that he's like, oh, and the barometric pressure was this.
Uh-huh.
Like, just similarly useless powers that it's like, well, we're never going to need this again. I
Uh-huh.
say that though, but they're gonna be on boats, I guess, at multiple other points, so maybe this will come up again.
I was gonna say, I think it actually is exceedingly important.
At least for this book, it's incredibly useful. But
Yeah.
thankfully, because Annabeth knows where they are, as the Coast Guard vessel is starting to Percy mentions that it almost looks like it's doing a double take because he says, I guess it isn't every day they see a yellow lifeboat with no engine going 100 knots an hour manned by 3 children. Understandable. That is
Yeah.
weird. But Annabeth is like, we can't let them catch us as they start to properly tail them. They turn on their lights, they're gaining speed. And Annabeth says, keep going into Chesapeake Bay. I know a place we can hide. All of her knowledge here is just from her time with Luke and Thalia, which we will get into later in the chapter.
So I'm glad you bring this up because it was a thought that I had and then I forgot about it. Her father is a professor or taught at West Point, correct?
Yep.
But they live in Virginia, I thought.
Do they live in Virginia? I can't
Am I
ever
making
remember.
that up?
No, I don't think you are. I just always get mixed up because by the time of Titan's Curse, he's moved to California. I'm looking up Annabeth's dad.
Mhm.
Frederick Chase.
While you're looking that up, here is my theory, potentially, which you could just outright disprove, because I know he was a professor of history at West Point, which means that he likely has a military background or a focus when it comes to military history, which would make sense that Athena was interested in him.
You are
Um,
specifically correct in that because one of the things that he does is when in Titan's Curse he shows up with an antique plane that he flies in to help the demigods in the battle.
that's right, like every historian has
Yep.
antique planes from what they study. Norfolk, Virginia is a huge, just like major military hub, specifically housing, I think, the United States' largest naval station. It might even be the world's largest naval station.
Hmm.
So there's tons of museums and stuff to do there with regards to history. In fact, we are going to be talking about some of that history later in this episode. So stick around for that.
Dun dun dun.
So there's a non-zero chance she literally just lived around here at some point.
I did check, and he was apparently born in Boston, but when Annabeth ran away, they were living in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, so that's still, again, that's a city that's further north, but it's closer than DC and in Arlington.
Yeah, they were in the vicinity. Although what I found particularly weird about that detail is it means that when they ran away and when Thalia and Luke and Annabeth were on the run, they ended up going further from camp before they went closer to camp.
Yes.
I don't know how relevant that particularly is, but it's interesting.
I mean, there's so I'm looking at a map right now. We're getting so fucking off track. This is awesome. There is a way that they could have gone down south to Norfolk, and then it looks like there is a bridge. Looks like Highway 13 that goes north up and around the Chesapeake Bay and up through Maryland and Delaware, which would not have nearly as much, I would think, traffic and monsters. It'd probably be easier to hide going that route than if they went up through Richmond, through Fredericksburg, through Washington, D.C., and then through Baltimore. Like, they basically
Yeah.
just get to bypass that section.
Makes sense. I bet those are dense with monsters given the increased population.
Yeah.
Neat.
Anyways, that's enough theory crafting for now. Annabeth knows this place for some
Yep.
reason.
And because of that, she's able to navigate them through. There's a fair few paragraphs really here where it's just Annabeth getting them to this little safe house, basically.
Yeah,
I
it's
believe
neat.
Percy calls
She
it a half-blood hideout, which I thought was really
Yes.
cool.
They're heading into a big old swamp. Percy hates it. He says, "We veered into a swampy area choked with marsh grass." He beaches the lifeboat at the foot of a giant cypress, and there is a non-zero chance that they are in what is known as the Great Dismal Swamp. Don't ask me how I know about
Oh.
that. It's just one of those trivial things that I have in the back of my head. And it's dude, if you think about a swamp, there you go. You got it.
Imagine that,
Shrek
but
is
dismal?
hiding out. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's beautiful in a way that a swamp is.
Yeah.
But where he's describing that there are these vine-covered trees, insects churring in the woods, the air being muggy, heavy, and hot, steam curling off the river. That's exactly what it is. And he says, "Yeah, it's not Manhattan." And I didn't like that. Which is so funny because I would consider Manhattan to be far dirtier and nastier than this literal swamp.
I completely understand and probably would agree. But I do think that his perspective is probably colored by the line he gives earlier where he mentions that he can actually feel the difference between the salt water to suddenly being over the fresh water on the boat. He mentions that suddenly he was tired and frazzled like he was coming down from a sugar high. And I thought this was interesting for two reasons. One reason is that because we know when he's at Camp Half-Blood originally in book 1 and falls into the river, that even that fresh water gives him a sort of second wind. Whereas here, the switch from freshwater or from saltwater to freshwater leaves him feeling tired. And if that is perhaps like just because he was on such a high from the salt water, or if it's because of how he was exerting himself to get them there and like navigating over the salt water up to this point. Like he's been using a lot of his powers. My best guess, as someone who has allergies and has had to use EpiPens, is that this is actually more like the feeling of using an EpiPen where you go from you already had adrenaline because you're dying to now you have so much adrenaline that when you crash, even the adrenaline that is still in your system, it feels like nothing because you've been pumped up on artificial adrenaline pumping straight directly into your blood vessels.
Mhm. And that just makes you're sick, effectively, right?
Dude, you crash so hard after. When I was a kid, it would literally always that much adrenaline would always make me puke because it's such a shock to your system. As an adult, it's like, no, you just crashed really hard and you're like, man, I was way up here and now I just desperately need a nap.
Gotcha. That's an interesting parallel.
But as they're going in here and they're exploring this swamp, they bury their lifeboat with branches so that it is hidden from anyone who might have tried to pursue them. And I thought this was an interesting little bit of, I think it's misdirection because Percy mentions a snake slithering past him. Tyson is swatting mosquitoes that are forming, quote, a buffet on his arm. And Tyson says, not a good place. And I think in this moment that Tyson is smelling monsters. I think that is exactly what's happening. But
Mhm.
they're all just going, yeah, of course he doesn't like it. Who likes a swamp?
Right.
That's it.
Totally
I just
agree.
think they should have been listening to Tyson because, man, as we have made very clear, he has basically not missed most of this book. Tyson has been an invaluable asset to this team.
Mhm. I clocked that too. But it's gonna be at least a little bit before we might be able to make that argument because right now they're just in a shitty poopy swamp.
Yep.
But Annabeth is treating it like she knows it like the back of her hand. After a couple of minutes, she just goes, "Here." And Percy looks, and all he sees is a patch of brambles. But then Annabeth moves aside a woven circle of branches, like a door, and he realizes that he's actually looking at a camouflage shelter. And this entire next section, it's not the most glamorous, it's not even the most exciting, but this shit rocks so much.
Dude,
I thought this was really neat.
you know what this made me want? This makes me want to beg Rick for a prequel series about Luke, Thalia, Annabeth, and Grover's time before they first got to Camp Half-Blood.
Mm,
Because
yeah,
you're so right. Everything they describe about this hideout, it is not impressive in the like, oh, architecturally or it's well designed. It is well designed for what it needs to be, which is literally just a hideout. And it's so cool. They find provisions here. And the fact that they have demigod provisions that they left behind, I thought was really
yeah.
interesting. Like, that
Mhm.
implies what monster attacked them while they were here that they had to flee in a hurry and leave behind their supplies. I want to know.
Yeah. Or alternatively, they say, "We'll leave this stuff here in case we need it in the future. It is properly a safe house."
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, we've described these books, especially the first book, as it being a road trip. A dangerous
Mm-hmm.
road trip, but a road trip. You get a small peek into what life was like before Camp Half-Blood for these people, and they are fucking survivalists.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a road trip. They are surviving.
Yeah. In a weird sense, it's almost like a post-apocalyptic world. We
Yes.
can't go into civilization, we can't use technology or we'll be attacked by monsters. There are threats constantly, and
Mhm.
because we're using supplies, things that, like, need to be celestial bronze to be able to kill a monster, we are using supplies from a bygone era, so they're
Yeah.
very limited. It's truly, like, it would be such a cool, weirdly post-apocalyptic prequel series, and I want it
Yeah.
so bad.
No, that's a great idea.
Oh, and I tell you what, now that I'm thinking about it, Jack, let me write it. Let's you and I write it. Rick, if you need some guys, we're available, okay? I know I've got a full-time job outside of this, but I'll drop everything.
Was gonna say, I got a full-time job, I'm getting my grad degree, but sure, man. I got it, and we'll
Yeah.
do it for exposure.
All right, hold on. Don't listen
Don't
to
worry,
him. We're
we'll
getting
we'll we'll
paid.
switch up on that. We'll just gotta hook them first.
We're open to negotiation. We'll put it that
That's a
way.
great yeah, there we go.
No.
But,
But
back to this cool-ass shelter.
yes, exactly.
Um, as Percy sticks his head in, he says that the inside was big enough for 3, even with Tyson being the 3rd, so it's pretty spacious. The walls were woven from plant material. Percy describes it was like a Native American hut. and it looked extremely waterproof as well. This was expertly made. Stacked in the corner is everything you would want for a camp out. There are sleeping bags, blankets, an ice chest, kerosene lamp, but there are also, as Connor mentioned, demigod provisions. Bronze javelin tips, a quiver full of arrows, an extra sword, and a little box of ambrosia. And Percy sniffs and he's like, "It smells really musty." And clearly it had been vacant for a very long time. But this, on top of everything we already said, this also makes the world feel so much more lived in.
Yeah.
There's a whole life and series of adventures that have gone on that we are not privy to, and will only be privy to by proxy of whatever Annabeth is comfortable with sharing. And we talk about that actually pretty soon, where
Mhm.
Percy is realizing this. Because he's heard these things before conceptually. He understands in concept that Annabeth had to travel some way with Thalia and Luke, and then Grover found them and took them to Camp Half-Blood, and that it was really fucking bad and really fucking hard. But that's about it. He's now actually starting to see it live. He's there. The remnants of what she had to go through. And he's in a bit of awe to start. He goes, "A half-blood hideout." And he looks at Annabeth, specifically in awe, and says, "You made this?" And Annabeth quietly, for reasons that I'm sure we could guess, said, "Yeah, Thalia and I, and Luke." And I love this little next part. As Percy is taking this all in, he says, "This shouldn't have bothered. I mean, I knew Thalia and Luke had taken care of Annabeth when she was little. I knew the three of them had been runaways together, hiding from monsters, surviving on their own, before Grover found them and tried to get them to Camp Half-Blood. I was on the fucking money. That's exactly what happened."
Mhm.
And he said, "But whenever Annabeth talked about the time she'd spent with them, I kind of felt, I don't know, uncomfortable." And Percy, being very introspective and honest with himself, says, "No, that's not the word. The word was jealous."
He shows off a lot of emotional intelligence in this chapter, I think.
Yeah.
And I so relate to that feeling. There's
Mhm.
nothing quite like hearing about something really cool that your friends did together and knowing that you never could have been there,
Mhm.
but just going, "Oh, but I would have loved to anyway." And I know it's not fair to you guys to say that you're not allowed to have fun without me around, but why'd you have fun without me?
Yeah. It's FOMO. It's all it
Mhm.
is. It's FOMO. And I really like this characterization because Percy knows, objectively speaking, that they suffered immensely throughout all of
Yes.
that. And it ended in tragedy.
Yeah.
It's bad. You don't wanna be a part of that. I do really like that Rick is playing with this concept of Percy feeling like, "Oh, shit, these people had lives before me. I'm a recent addition. The
Mhm.
most important parts of my life have involved these people, but I might not have been involved in the most important parts of their lives."
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. That's actually deeply profound, I think, Jack.
Thank you, thank you.
And specifically, I think what's kind of layering on top of that is Percy goes, "So you don't think Luke will look for us here?" And Annabeth just shakes her head and says, "We made a dozen safe houses like this. I doubt Luke even remembers where they are or cares." And so this one place, which sticks out so much to Percy and has left him in awe and wonder and jealousy, Annabeth's like, "Yeah, we made 10 more of these minimum. Like, this is not abnormal for us to have stayed in." And just, I love the discrepancy between him being like, "Whoa, demigod adventure," and her being like, "Yeah, we had to do this quite a few times. This one was underwhelming. We had to survive."
Yeah. I mean, it's almost kinda like, I don't know if it's a false equivalency, but it's almost like Percy's hearing about his friends who were in a fucking war together,
Yeah.
and it's like, "Man, I wish I was over there." They're like, no, you don't. Like,
Yeah.
this was not good. This is not a good memory. This is not a good place."
Mhm. Ugh.
Just because we bonded doesn't make the drama any less. Like, it's
Yeah.
not good.
Dude, it's really cool and interesting to watch, and Percy watches as she's throwing her stuff down. She then throws herself down on a blanket and starts going through her bag. And Percy says her body language made it pretty clear she didn't want to talk. So Percy looks to Tyson and says, "Hey, would you mind scouting around outside, like looking for a wilderness convenience store or something?" And Tyson's like, "Convenience store?" Percy says, "Yeah, for snacks, powdered donuts or something. Just don't go too far." So Tyson, just the absolute little cinnamon roll that he is like, "Powdered donuts. I will look for powdered donuts in the wilderness," and heads outside yelling, "Here, donuts! Here, donuts!"
Yeah. He's awesome. He's on a snipe
He
hunt.
is. And so Percy has dismissed Tyson so that he can get Annabeth to open up a little bit. He sits down across from her and he immediately is like, "I know what's on your mind." He says, "I'm sorry about, seeing Luke." And I like her emotional maturity. She's recognizing it's not your fault. And now they're cooking because I think they're catching all the right details. She says, "He let us go too easily." Percy says, "I'd hoped I'd been imagining it." But, oh, Percy actually. It's Percy who gets it. Percy
It
said,
is.
"He let us go too easily." And he's like, "I'd hoped I'd been imagining it." But when Annabeth agrees, she's like,
Mhm.
"Fuck." Or rather, he's like, "Fuck," because now he
So
knows.
you're mixing them. You're mixing and
I
matching them
know.
right now.
I turned the page and I lost all idea of who was who.
No, you're good. Here, I'll clarify. Percy said, "Hey, Luke let us go too easily." And he looked at Annabeth and said, "Surely she would disagree and make me feel better." But she nods and he says, "Uh-oh."
Hey, fuck.
And she says, which is good, it means he's catching on, 'cause I was thinking the same thing. But we overheard him say something about a gamble. They'll take the bait. I think he was talking about us. And Percy, he does what he does best, asks a clarifying question. The fleece is the bait or Grover? And Annabeth is just being as edgy as possible right now. She's studying the edge of her blade, the edge of her knife. "I don't know, Percy. Maybe he wants the fleece for himself."
I love that they're thinking about it. I really do
Mhm.
like that as a reader, if you don't know what they want it for, there's options here.
Yeah,
But I also think that, like, this is the part of the novel where the similarities to the previous novel start to become incredibly apparent, right? They'll take the bait. Okay, so we're on a quest that perhaps was planned by our enemies. We are
right.
walking into a trap. But the difference is that this time they've caught it. And I like that we're not just going to completely repeat the beats. We're going to be aware of what's happening and try to use that to our advantage. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Rick does a really good job of building on these characters and making them wiser through experience.
Yeah.
And I do like Annabeth has a theory. She's not saying it's correct, but she just says maybe he's hoping we'll do all the hard work and then he can steal it from us.
Hmm.
There's no reason he would just poison the tree for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Which, hey man, that's the classic Indiana Jones.
Hmm.
You solve the puzzles, you clear the dangers, and then Mr. Italian man with his fine suit and his fedora comes in behind you and takes everything.
You are absolutely correct. I think that's exactly what is being intended here. And I like that Annabeth is putting it together. But then the conversation shifts.
Yeah.
And this I thought was, again, really, really good. And I'm going to just pause for a moment because I'm realizing I'm saying there's a lot I enjoy. And that's weird because this chapter is like, do I think this is the best chapter? No. But all the little things it does right, at least so far. And I think that's something I appreciated. As a bridge chapter, it doesn't need to be perfect, but I like that it is successful and entertaining at what it is trying to do. And so with that, Percy starts asking Annabeth some questions about Thalia. What did he mean that Thalia would have been on his side? And Annabeth immediately, he's wrong. Percy, you don't sound so sure. She glares. what I really like is how she gets to that conclusion. Because she says that Percy reminds her deeply of Thalia, that they're like scarily alike. And she follows that up with either you would have been best friends or you would have strangled one another. And she says, Thalia got angry with her dad sometimes. So do you. Would you turn against Olympus because of that? And Percy thinks about it for a second, shakes his head. He says, no. And she says, okay, then. Neither would she. Luke's wrong. And I love that. That is pragmatic and hopeful Annabeth coalescing into one for a moment here. I have a logical way to get to the conclusion I need to get to. And also, I cannot believe that she would agree with Luke because that would shatter my image of her and mean that perhaps Luke was right. And I need to be right so that I can keep going. So if you are like Thalia and you wouldn't do it and you don't agree with Luke, then we're good. Everything about that interaction to me is perfect. It characterizes both characters so well, and it tells us about Thalia in advance of her appearance, spoiler alert, at the end of the novel.
I thought it was a very fascinating parallel. And I also like how she's made this logic tree in her head, which is Thalia equals Percy. So that predicate alone is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
She is using it, as you said, to hold on to a notion that she hopes, she wants it to be true. And she is saying, how do I logic my way to make it seem true as well? But Connor, as I'm sure you know, it's okay to draw allusions to people and it's okay to
Mm-hmm.
compare and contrast. But to compare somebody to another person one to one and set it as the standard is very dangerous.
Yeah. And I don't know if maybe this was intended, but it specifically made me think about book 1 when she's like, I was hoping you'd be a child of Zeus. She was hoping for Thalia. She was absolutely hoping to just replace that void that was left and the
Yeah.
trauma that was there. And I think this is yet again I think over the course of book 1, she realizes that Percy and Thalia are different people. They will choose different things. But this is her, especially after a moment where Luke has really hurt her, trying to latch on to that. It's okay. I have something to fill the void. It'll be fine. Don't think about it type of attitude.
Yep. You and I, same page, man.
Honestly, it's a short but really strong scene. Percy, at that point, he's like, I have so many questions. He decides to ask her about Cyclopes and why she doesn't like them. And just as she's about to go into the story and tell him, Tyson crawls back into the hut and goes, powdered donuts. And Percy's like, really?
Yeah.
Annabeth's like,
He's got the pastry box. He
where
literally
did you
has
get that? We are in the middle of nowhere. You should not. And he's just like, it's just 50 feet over there. I went to Monster Donut. And Annabeth's like, oh no, we're so fucking screwed.
Yeah, pause for just a second.
Yep.
All right, because there's a couple of things that are exceedingly plot important that you did just brazenly gloss over.
Sure.
Percy doesn't just say, "Hey, so Cyclopes." He says, "What did Luke mean about Cyclopes?" He said, "You of all people." Annabeth says, "I know what he said. He was talking about the real reason Thalia died."
Oh yeah, that is very
So
plot important. I did
that's
totally gloss
exceedingly
over that.
important.
We'll
And
get the full story later, so I was like, we don't need this,
I
but
know,
you're very right.
Connor, there are people that listen to this that do not read the book.
That's why I paused to say, wait a minute, you are exceedingly correct, Jack. This is of vital importance.
And Percy waits. He takes a breath, wants to see what she has to say, and Annabeth draws a shaky breath, tries to steady herself, says, "You can never trust a Cyclops, Percy. 6 years ago, on the night Grover was leading us to Half-Blood Hill," and then she's interrupted as the door of the hut creaks open and Tyson crawls in, and he proudly presents a box full of powdered donuts.
Donuts!
There are times, and I've drawn attention to it before, where I get frustrated when people get cut off or don't finish explaining when they've got time, whatever. For what it's worth, I don't care who you are. You are going to be distracted and forget entirely about what you were talking about.
if you are in the middle of a swamp, there is no civilization near you, and your friend who you just sent outside comes back and is like, "Dog, look at this cheeseburger." Like,
Yeah.
I just found it. It's right over there. There's a guy. He's just selling them.
Percy was like, literally, what is the most wild goose chase I can come up with? And Tyson said, you're not going to believe this. I found the goose right there. It's right outside the door.
Yeah. It's a snipe hunt. It's like from Up
Mm-hmm.
with Russell. He's like, "I found the snipe." Mr. Frederickson's like, "What the fuck are you talking about, kid?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's right there. There he is." And sure as
See?
shit, there's the snipe.
Yup. It, dude, it's so funny. It's genuinely good. And of all the reasons that we get cut off and don't get full information, I am willing to excuse this one because it is fantastic.
Yes, and I
And
would also want to investigate it immediately.
yes, so that is what they do.
I didn't realize this is when we got Monster Donuts.
Mm-hmm.
Like what we were talking about at the beginning of the chapter. Why? I mean, I guess it was a pleasant surprise, but also, dude, this chapter should have been related specifically to Monster Donut. And I don't know if it's because in D and Demigods you really like hammed up the Monster Donut side of
I love
things, but
Monster Donut.
there are certain things from Percy Jackson that are just in my brain. They're just rooting around in there. They are crystallized. They will never leave. Monster Donut is one of them.
How could you forget it? Monster
Right?
Donut is gotta be one of Rick's best inventions because it is yet again this perfect merging of, yeah, sure, there's mythology and shit, but like monsters gotta eat, so I guess they'd have a donut chain?
They have many chains. Monster Donut is just one of them.
Yeah.
It is, and this sounds so melodramatic because it is literally Monster Donut, but it's so inspired.
I agree. He absolutely buried the lead for this chapter by not just fucking calling it "We Arrive at Monster Donut." I'd have been like, that's lazy, but it's 100% correct and the right chapter title.
Yeah, or it's like we find donuts in the swamp or something. I don't know.
Yeah, anything. We buy donuts in a swamp. Tyson buys donuts in a swamp. There you go.
Sure. Yeah, there you go.
Either way, the lore implications as well here are insanity because they're crouching outside. They're trying to figure out, like, should we be worried? And Annabelle's like, yeah, we absolutely should be worried. And she goes on to explain because Percy's like, oh, come on, Annabeth. Monster Donut doesn't mean monsters. It's a chain. We've got them in New York. And she goes, yes, it's a chain. And don't you think it's strange that one appeared immediately after you told Tyson to go get donuts right here in the middle of the woods? Percy thinks about it. He's like, huh, maybe, but donuts
It's
aren't
also,
evil.
let's describe what this looks like too, because this, it feels like an SCP.
Oh, yeah, I was going to come back to that, but please.
They're crouching in the trees. Annabeth is like in the brush and she's like, "This is really bad." She's so fucking scared. And Percy watching, not understanding why this is so bad. It's weird, but like, why is this so dangerous? And he's looking at it. There's a donut shop in the middle of the swamp. It looks brand new. It's got brightly lit windows, a parking area, a tiny little road that leads off into the forest. Probably doesn't go anywhere, but they've got a little road, and there's nothing else around. There's no cars in the parking lot. And you can see through the windows, there's one employee just bored reading a magazine behind the cash register, and that's it. That's it. The store's marquee, big black letters. Even Percy could read it. You can't mistake it. Monster Donut. It's just there. It just spawned in.
Dude, I love it. It's so fucking amazing. It's perfect. I want real life monster donuts. Tell you what, hey, Disney, get on it. One of your theme parks, I want to go to Monster Donut in Hollywood Studios. Chop, chop.
He's already got it all laid out too. There's a big cartoon ogre taking a bite out of the O in Monster. Percy says it smells really good, like proper fresh baked chocolate donuts. And I love, again, it's weird and kind of creepy that it just was here seemingly out of nowhere. But Annabeth is abject terror. She's like shaking her head. She said, "This shouldn't be here. It's wrong."
Hold on. Thinking about the episode, I think they skipped Monster Donut in the show.
Connor, I have not watched that show. I'm not gonna front. Everything I've heard has made me not wanna watch it.
Yeah, man. I'm now giving my official review of Percy Jackson season 2 on Disney Plus. No monster donut, 0 out of 10. All right, we can move on.
Great.
But we are at Monster Donut. It's wicked. Percy is insistent that it's a chain, it's not that big a deal. And at this point, Annabeth is like, it could be a nest. Tyson whimpers. He's like, that's not good. And I think, again, he's like, he can smell the monsters, so he is properly worried. And then Annabeth drops some of the craziest fucking lore.
Yeah.
She says, haven't you ever wondered how franchise stores pop up so fast? One day there's nothing, and then the next day, boom, there's a new burger place or coffee shop or whatever. First a single store, then 2, then 4. Exact replicas spreading across the country. Percy's like, no, why would I think about that? She's like, Percy, some of the chains multiply so fast because all of their locations are magically linked to the life force of a monster. Some children of Hermes figured it out in the 1950s. What?
Yeah.
That's where she ends.
No. She specifically says some children of Hermes figured out how to do it in the 1950s. They breed and then cut off.
Yep,
The breed is important.
that is true. They are specifically breeding franchises?
They're breeding monsters, which create franchises, which I like to think you talk about the 1950s. This has to be referencing McDonald's, right?
Oh, 100%.
It's gotta
Absolutely.
be.
No doubt about it. That's it. It's just, it's so insane in canon in Percy Jackson lore. Every fucking, like, corner McDonald's is like, yep, that is tied to the head of a Hydra or something.
Yeah, something. Well, I guess minor spoiler, we find out pretty quickly. She says they breed, and then she freezes. They're having a Jurassic Park moment. She freezes. Percy goes, what? They breed what? And Annabeth says, no sudden moves. She says it like her life depended on it. And it does. She says, very slowly, turn around. And then Percy hears it. It's a scraping noise, like something large dragging its belly through the leaves. And he turns and he sees this rhino-sized thing moving through the shadows of the trees. It's hissing, its front half writhing in all different directions, and he can't quite comprehend what he's seeing. He can't make sense of it. But then he realized he'd seen the thing, and it has multiple necks, at least 7, each topped with a hissing reptilian head. Its skin is leathery, and then, because it's Rick, he's got a little goofiness to it. Under each neck, it wore a plastic bib that read, I'm a Monster Donut Kid.
Perfect.
Yep. And
I love it.
it's interesting. I almost feel like this is a small error. Percy takes out his ballpoint pen, he takes out Riptide, Annabeth locks eyes and is like, do not do that yet. And it just goes in. We don't get a proper, like, name drop of the Hydra. They just say, it looks like this. And then Percy just says, I understood. A lot of monsters have terrible eyesight. It was possible the Hydra might pass us by. I feel like usually when we get a big reveal of, like, a really famous monster, Percy doesn't just say, this is what it looked like, and then just
Mhm.
in the middle of another sentence be like, so the Hydra did this.
You know what? That's a good point. He doesn't. I wonder if Rick thinks that there's enough of an understanding of what a Hydra is, like as a cultural touch point, that he's like, I don't have to explain this one.
And that's fair, and that's true. It just reads weird because that hasn't happened, I feel like.
No, I agree. But the Hydra, that they don't need to explain. They
Yep,
notice
they don't announce it.
2 of the heads are already ripping apart a piece of yellow canvas. Percy immediately recognizes, ooh, that's one of our duffel bags. Fuck, that is not good. And he remembers he's seen a stuffed Hydra head before. They have a trophy at camp that's kept in the big house. And he's now describing each head was diamond shaped like a rattlesnake's, but the mouths were lined with jagged rows of shark like teeth. Tyson is trembling, and for the first time will not be a valuable member of the group. But I thought this was a lame reason for it to attack them, and I didn't like it. If there's one thing in this chapter that I did not like, it was this, because it says Tyson was trembling. He stepped back and accidentally snapped a twig. We're doing the stepped on a stick thing? Really?
Yeah. I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. Is it lazy and cheap? Absolutely, but that's why I think it's kind of funny.
You know what? I'll give you that. If we're going to just be like, hey, we might as well play with the stupid trope to get the big monster over here, why not step on a twig? Fair enough.
Yeah,
And that is
yeah.
exactly what happened.
And following that, Annabeth realizing, damn, he stepped on a twig. How cliche. A true child of Athena, she comes up with a great plan. Scatter! And
Yep.
she dives to the right.
Hey, not a bad plan. Not as effective in this situation against a Hydra with multiple heads, but I get it.
Yeah, she dives to the right, Percy rolls to the left, and they're fighting now. It's a fight.
Yep.
Hydra heads are starting to spit out arcs of green liquid that are shooting past them, splashing against the trees. And as soon as they hit, the trunks begin to smoke and disintegrate. So they spit acid. Not great,
Awesome.
not super good. The last time Percy had to fight an enemy that shot acid out at him did not end well. I'm remembering that correctly, right?
Yep.
Yeah, not
It
great.
didn't shoot acid, though. What are you thinking of? I assume you're thinking of the Chimera.
Did the Chimera not, like, spit acid at him?
It didn't spit acid, but it was venomous because it did poison him. It got a good bite into him.
Maybe that's it.
So,
In any
yet
event,
again, yep.
acid is bad.
Well, and Percy, I'm just going to reinforce this quickly. Terrible track record with venomous monsters. Chimera bit him, poisoned. Pit Scorpion stung him, poisoned. So, it's only those two, but it's weird that it happened twice.
That's true, but I guess this isn't even really venom, this is just getting acid thrown at you.
Yeah, it's supposed to be venom, but I'll give it this.
Mm.
Rick, you can allow it to spit instead of just having venomous fangs.
But anyways,
So,
trees are starting to topple over, and we get a crazy feat of strength from Percy.
yes.
Genuinely incredibly impressive. One of the trees is toppling towards Tyson, who didn't move. He was very scared and was petrified. And Percy just goes, "Tyson!" And fucking linebacker tackles him and manages to knock Tyson out of the way. That's crazy.
Yeah. It is always very impressive to see Percy fully demonstrate how he is not mortal. It's like, holy shit, he does have like Herculean level strength. And he's a
Yes.
kid. He's not even fully there yet. Like, he is growing in to be one of the greats.
Yeah. I mean, he's really underselling himself here. This is one of those
Yes.
situations where I remember, like, damn, Percy's the one telling the story. If it were anybody else, they'd be like, Percy managed to tackle the Cyclops that had actively gone head to head with the Colchis Bulls and the Lystragonians, tackled him out of the way like he was a little kid.
Yep. And the Bear Twins. Don't forget those
Yes,
guys
yeah.
in there.
Uh-huh.
Just like giant monster after giant monster that this guy's faced down. And Percy, as you pointed out, can just tackle him out of the way. Percy says, the good news, Tyson was momentarily out of danger. The bad news, I was about to be melted into a puddle of goo. And Percy, reacting quickly as the monster has a head snapped toward his direction, makes a bad choice. And
Yeah.
Annabeth's like, no! Too late. I sliced the Hydra's head clean off.
Yeah. I was mad at this at first, but it gets a pass. Again, it gets another pass this chapter because Percy says he was going off of reflex and without thinking. He just did it.
Yeah. I specifically think that was his I am protecting my little brother instinct.
I'm
He
sure.
just pushed
I'm
Tyson
sure.
out of the way. He's fully in fight or flight. Your head's gone. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And I like he even recognizes pretty immediately, like, Percy remembers how the Hydra works. He understands the
Mhm.
mechanism of it. So he doesn't have to be told by Annabeth, if you cut off one of its head, two more grow back in its place. He's just like, ah, fuck. Uh-oh.
No,
That's my bad.
what Annabeth does scold him with is
Uh-huh.
1, that's what you're concerned about right now. 2, hilarious. Percy, Annabeth scolded. You just opened another monster donut somewhere. And Percy says basically what I just said. I'm about to die and you're worried about that?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
She understands the dangers of chains and franchise companies on small town America and
So
how they
true.
actually push out mom and pop shops and harm the local economy because of it. That's that child of Athena. She understands. She's thinking of the micro and macroeconomics when it comes to this.
Honestly understandable. Yeah, corporations are evil. But
Mhm.
apparently so is this Hydra. So Percy's like, "How do we kill it?" Of course, he asks Annabeth because she would know. And I like that this is not a fight where it's like we have to wait for them to figure it out. She said, "Fire! We need fire!"
Yeah.
Percy's like, "Oh, yeah, that is how Hercules did it."
Which, hey, there you go. Another point for you, Connor.
Mhm.
Another Hercules Percy point.
Oh, trust me. I was gonna bring it up.
I know. I did it for you. How does it
I
feel?
appreciate it. It feels great. I'm glad we're on the same page. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I fully understand that this is just because Hercules has touched nearly everything in Greek myth,
Mhm.
but also, the more that Percy does Herculean things, the more I think it reinforces that they do share many different traits. And I think over the course of his arc, there will continue to be things that line up one to one, including but not limited to being hated by Hera for some reason.
Uh-huh.
Not that that comes up this chapter, but it will come up in today's myth section. So be excited for that. As it were, though, they are continuing to fight. They're inching backward, dodging acid splashes, and Tyson is smashing the heads of the Hydra, trying to just beat it back and keep it out of the way. When suddenly they hear a some sort of strange chugging noise. Annabeth goes, "What is that?" And Tyson, being a Cyclops who can identify forge stuff, I guess,
Sure.
says, "Steam engine." Percy goes, "What? Why would that be here?" He ducks as acid flies over his head, and a familiar female voice shouts, "There! Prepare the 32-pounder!" Percy says, "I
Yeah.
didn't dare look away from the Hydra, but if that was who I thought it was, I figured we now had an enemy on two fronts."
Yup. And this is where we start getting little details that show that Rick 100% was a history teacher. And this is fun for me. This is fun for me, Connor, and I'll talk
Yeah,
all about this later. But Connor, do you know what the 32 pounder means?
I
Like what that
don't.
is? Okay.
I
So
assumed a
the
cannon.
30 it is naval artillery. And the
Okay,
32 pounder, basically the way that artillery worked during this time, naval artillery cannons, is 32 pounder is the weight of the shot that was being used, the weight of the cannonball.
that makes
So
sense.
that means that they are using a 32-pound ball of fucking dense iron, and that is what they are loading. And that is actually an incredibly accurate, if not outright exactly, the kind of shot that would have been used on this machine that we're about to find out about.
Hmm, interesting.
It
Well,
will fuck you up. If you get caught in this, you're missed. You are pink mist.
and Annabeth, recognizing this, she says, "Hit the dirt!" They all
Yep, she
dive for
gives
the ground.
another great Athena strategy. Fucking
Yep.
dodge! Get out of the way!
Literally just do anything so that you don't get hit by that. The
Mhm.
Hydra is fucking vaporized. So we've identified a new way to kill a Hydra. You can burn the stumps where its heads were, or you can just shoot it with a fucking cannon.
Shoot it with artillery. Yeah. And to be fair, that is very effective against most things.
Yeah,
This
man.
does raise an interesting question that I would think would get answered probably next chapter. Does that mean that they have celestial bronze artillery shots? They've got, like, celestial bronze cannonballs?
It must mean that. If it's not specifically addressed, it 100% specifically implies that those cannonballs are either celestial bronze, imperial gold, or Stygian iron. And we know it's not Stygian iron because that's like something that comes from the underworld. And we know it's not imperial gold because that's Roman. So therefore, it must be celestial bronze.
Well, hold on. Stygian iron comes from the underworld. These guys, this is a ghost ship,
That's true. I guess it could be Stygian iron. You are right. Yeah.
and they're
So, okay,
iron
it could be
cannonballs. It's a
celestial
possibility.
bronze or Stygian iron. Unless we are
Mhm.
told otherwise, new headcanon is that it is Stygian iron then.
I like that. That's really fucking cool. But
Mm.
yeah, it's dope. There's a fucking earth-shattering boom that echoes from the river. Percy says there's a flash of light, a column of smoke, and the Hydra exploded right in front of us, showering us with nasty green slime that vaporized as soon as it hit, the way monster guts tend to do. Blown to smithereens, bro.
Yeah, I guess that there are two ways to kill a Hydra. And way number
Yeah.
two is hit it center mass.
Yeah, blow it to smithereens with conventional weaponry. That's right.
Percy
And
stands up, coughing from the gunpowder smoke. And he looks out,
yep,
and yeah, believe it or not, chugging down the river was what he says is the strangest ship he'd ever seen.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting little machine. He says that it rode low in the water like a submarine. Its deck was totally plated with iron. In the middle of the deck was a trapezoid-shaped casemate with slats on each side for cannons. Now, here is this description. Oddly specific. Do you think Percy knows all these things because it's a boat? Or do you think that this is just Rick flexing his history stuff because he thinks history stuff is cool?
So, Jack, I was going to ask if this highly specific description was correct to the time and period, because I feel like you would know that. And given what you're saying, I'm therefore going with flex. 100% flex.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. We'll get to it in a bit. We are now officially burying the lead. They see this weird ass boat, and there's a flag waving atop it with a wild boar and spear on a blood red field. And there are lining the deck these zombies in gray uniforms, dead soldiers with shimmering faces that only partially covered their skulls, like the ghouls that Percy had seen in the underworld guarding Hades' palace.
Gnarly.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is an ironclad, a Civil War battle cruiser. And Percy is able to actually make out the name just along the prow in moss covered letters, the CSS Birmingham. And of course, standing, if you couldn't guess, next to the smoking cannon that had almost killed our group, wearing full Greek battle armor, was Clarice.
I love her line here as she just looks down at them and says, "Losers. But I suppose I have to rescue you. Come aboard." Push comes to shove. She is an asshole, but she's not evil.
Yeah. No, she's malicious, but, that malice is fortunately pointed elsewhere right now.
Yeah, currently well directed.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the end of, honestly, and in the grand scheme of things, rather uneventful chapter despite a Hydra attack,
Mhm.
where we move from point A to point B that I very much enjoyed. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be so honest with you, Jack. It has left me at the end of it going, I'm remembered to that fucking boat. It sounds so weird. I can't wait to figure out what horrible design principles went into its creation.
Yeah, dude. Ironclads are fucking wild. And again, we'll talk about them at length once you're done with the myths. But before we do that, let's do just a quick kind of end of chapter
Yeah.
and general thoughts. I agree. I think you said it about halfway through the chapter that you're like,
Mhm.
there are all these little pieces and they manage to fit together and they're all quite satisfying in their own ways. And in a worse book, in a worse chapter, they would feel disjointed. But honestly, together, it works quite well. It leaves you feeling satisfied. It is not
Mhm.
the best chapter in the book. Honestly, I don't think it's going to breach top 3, but it is
Mhm.
fun and does a really good job bridging from one place to another. This book has really, really improved the bridge chapters, in my opinion.
I fully agree.
And
And that was my big takeaway.
yes, I view this chapter kind of like trail mix.
Mm. Mhm.
It's got all these different little pieces. And you don't think that they'd necessarily work well together just from looking at it. It's quite disjointed, but it gets the job done and is actually quite delectable.
That is a very good analogy, and I agree. We've talked about this chapter now in its entirety, and my full view on it is if this is your favorite chapter in this book, you're fucking crazy. But if you disliked this chapter, you're probably being too hard on it. It is
Yes.
very good at what it is trying to do. The small moments are very good, and it's highly enjoyable despite not being one of the biggest climactic moments. It's got a little bit of everything, and it plays it off very well.
Yeah. There are some chapters where I know you and I are like, on a reread, we'd skip it. I wouldn't skip
Mhm.
this one.
You wouldn't need to, I don't think, because it moves pretty quickly between the different beats, which I also
Yes.
appreciated, right? We
Mhm.
don't spend 3 pages just meandering around inside the little hideout talking about whatever Percy and Annabeth decide to get through. And I'm sure I would love all of that dialogue, but it would slow down the novel. We don't spend too much time on the boat. We don't have to have a proper encounter with the Coast Guard. And even the Hydra encounter is started and resolved pretty quickly, all things considered.
Mhm.
But I suppose while we're on the subject of Hydras, if you would like, we can find a seat somewhere on this ship and start talking about some myths.
Let's do it.
Unfortunately, I have deceived you all. We're not going to be starting with Hydras. No, no, no. Because I mentioned that a certain object was important and related to a myth. Of course, the Thermos of Winds is I would say, pretty one-to-one modern adaptation of the Bag of Winds given to Odysseus in the Odyssey. Do you remember the Bag of Winds, Jack?
I sure do.
Okay, good. So, it's used very differently, but it's a mythological counterpart. We've talked about it a lot. This, in many ways, is a book that's drawing heavily on the Odyssey. So, I like that we get to see some of its kind of key magic items get used in Percy Jackson. So, if you've only read The Tale of the Odyssey at home, you may or may not remember the Bag of Winds. It's given to Odysseus specifically to help ensure a safe journey home. If you, like me, absolutely love Epic the Musical, which is a set of concept albums that are a modern retelling of the Odyssey in the form of a musical, then you are probably specifically familiar with the Windbag. For those of you who are Epic fans, I'm going to warn you now. The Windbag is not nearly as important in the actual original text as it is in the musical, and we're not going to be talking about that today. But let's get into the Bag of Winds. I'm sure you remember at one point in your life sitting in a classroom and being told about the various types of conflict in stories, right? Man versus man versus society, whatever.
Mhm.
The Odyssey is a large story that encompasses a variety of settings, characters, and of course, conflicts. However, I feel like it's pretty undeniable that one of those conflicts is man versus nature. Odysseus is struggling against the sea on his journey home.
Mhm.
The Odyssey is set at a time when sea travel was incredibly dangerous and unpredictable, and this is reflected in the culture of the ancient Achaeans in many ways. I mean, just look at Zeus and Poseidon. They're two most important deities, and they're both storm deities. So, I don't think it's surprising to anyone that the story of Odysseus is a story in which nature is working against him. Consider this passage from Book 9 of the Odyssey, where Odysseus describes the sailing conditions leaving Troy.
All right, this is Odysseus.
Yep.
Okay. Unique New York. Red leather, yellow leather. I'm doing my warm-ups, Connor.
No, this is good.
Now Zeus, the lord of cloud, roused in the north a storm against the ships, and driving veils of squall moved down like night on land and sea. The bows went plunging at the gust, sails cracked and lashed out strips in the big wind. We saw death in that fury.
So, thankfully for Odysseus, that first storm came and went. But unfortunately, it was not the last, nor was it the worst. So I mentioned that was Book 9. Book 9 ends with Odysseus setting sail again after his encounter with Polyphemus, the Cyclops. And Book 10 begins with Odysseus making landfall on Aeolia Island, the land of Aeolus Hippocrates, the Wind King. Brief side note here. It's not actually entirely clear based on the Odyssey whether or not Aeolus is a god, or just a king, or perhaps a minor deity. The further you get from the Olympians themselves, the harder it becomes to clearly define who is and is not a god. The good news is, we don't really need to know that for this story. All I need you to know is that Aeolus, if he is a mortal, is not a regular mortal, and it's entirely possible that he's a minor god. And I think that's what most modern contexts would describe him as. So, quick point of order so that I don't have to keep clarifying. Everything else that we covered from today's myth section for the Windbag is going to come from Book 10 of the Odyssey, in which Odysseus is telling his current hosts about his journey. So, Odysseus just tells them about his time on Aeolus's island.
Here we put in, lodged in the town and palace, while Aeolus played host to me. He kept me 1 full month to hear the tale of Troy, the ships and the return of the Achaeans, all which I told him point by point in order. When in return, I asked his leave to sail and asked for provisioning. He stinted nothing, adding a bull's hide sewn from neck to tail into a mighty bag, bottling storm winds, for Zeus had long ago made Aeolus warden of winds, to rouse of calm at will. He wedged this bag under my afterdeck, lashing the neck with shining silver wire so not a breath got through. Only the west wind he lofted for me in quartering breeze to take my squadron spanking home. No luck. The fair wind failed us when our prudence failed. 9 days and nights we sailed without event, till on the 10th we raised our land. We neared it, and saw men building fires along the shore. But now, being weary to the bone, I fell into a deep slumber. I had worked the sheet 9 days alone, and given it to no one, wishing to spill no wind on the homeward run. But while I slept, the crew began to parley. Silver and gold they guessed were in that bag bestowed on me by Aeolus' great heart. These fucking guys.
Mm-hmm.
Temptation had its way with my companions, and they untied the bag. Then every wind roared into a hurricane. The ships went pitching west with many cries. Our land was lost. Roused up, despairing in that gloom, I thought, should I go overside for a quick finish? That's crazy. He said, should I fucking kill myself right now?
I left that in there just for you, Jack. I
This
debated
is a
cutting it, and I was like, nah, he's got to read
no.
this.
This is a phenomenal quote. Roused up, despairing in that gloom, I thought, should I go overside for a quick finish, or clench my teeth and stay among the living? Phenomenal questions, Odysseus.
There you go. You were hoping for some questions from Odysseus, and
I
there they
was! I
are.
was like, these are so many statements. Where are the questions? Where's the inquiry?
Oh, I've got the questions this time. Because you see, that
Mm.
storm blew them all the way back to the island of Aeolus, all the way back to Aeolia. And
They went all the way back. That's crazy.
all the way back. So, by the way, in case you're doing the math at home, that means that they could have been from Troy back to Ithaca in fewer than 2 months. Yeah. But unfortunately, they arrive, and Odysseus recounts the exclamations of Aeolus and his family when he entered their hall. Why, back again, Odysseus? What sea fiend rose in your path? Did we not launch you well for home, or for whatever land you chose? And Odysseus replies,
Out of my melancholy. He's so depressed right now. I
yes.
can just imagine he is just fucking dark in the face. His eyes are just fucking blank. He says, out of my melancholy, I replied, mischief aboard and nodding at the tiller, a damned drowse did for me. Make good my loss, dear friends, you have the power. Gently I pleaded, but they turned cold and still.
And
He said, for the
Aeolus,
love of fucking God. He said, please. I didn't do it. These fucking idiots that I was forced to be with, they fucked it up. I did nothing wrong. Please help me out. And they really said, Doug, we gave you the magic item here.
That's
That
it.
little
That's what we had.
maneuver is gonna cost them 10 years.
So fucking crazy. Oh my god. Oh, Odysseus, poor guy.
Yep. And Aeolus responds, "Take yourself out of this land, creeping thing. No law, no wisdom lays it on me now to help a man the blessed gods detest. Out! Your voyage here was cursed by heaven." And the rest is history. That is the story of the Bag of Winds. The bag that is given to and lost by Odysseus in fewer than 60 lines of the epic poem. Less than a page in my copy.
Damn.
One little thing that I do find particularly fun from this story, in case you missed our discussion on ancient Greek practices regarding hospitality in Chapter 8, I suggest you go check it out. It's really cool. But this is actually a great example of those practices. Look at the way that Aeolus requests news from Odysseus while he is there, and then graciously sends him on his way after having gotten the full story he wanted. But when Odysseus returns, it could be seen as abusing Aeolus's hospitality. This time, Odysseus has brought no new news, nothing of value, and he has squandered the greatest gift he did receive from Aeolus's first gift of hospitality. And thus, he is he's shunned. He is called a creeping thing, as he is told to leave the island and never return.
Yeah, that's tough.
Hooray, the wind bag! What a happy story for Odysseus. You ready to talk about another happy story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Because now we're talking about the Hydra. And I want to be clear, I mean the Hydra. And a little bit about Heracles, but before we get there. In Percy Jackson, and I'm sure many other similar fantasy settings, there are many Hydras. They're a race of monster. But in Greek mythology, there is but one notable Hydra, the Lernaean Hydra. The first written reference to the Lernaean Hydra comes to us in Hesiod's Theogony, where we're given its parentage. Men say that Typhon the Terrible, outrageous and lawless, was joined in love to her, the maid with glancing eyes. In case you forgot, this is a reference to Echidna, mother of monsters. Check out chapter 13 of book 1 for more on her. Hesiod then goes on to describe how Echidna bore 2 other monsters before going on to the third, as it says, "And again she bore a third, the evil-minded Hydra of Lerna, whom the goddess white-armed Hera nourished, being angry beyond measure with the mighty Heracles. And her Heracles, the son of Zeus, and of the house Amphitryon, together with warlike Aeolus, destroyed with the unpitying sword through the plans of Athena, the spoil driver." And we've definitely covered this before when talking about monsters on this podcast, and I've drawn attention to it quite specifically. But this is just another example of one of the many multi-headed monsters that are produced by Echidna and Typhon. But Hesiod mentions another important detail that I think gives the Hydra a leg up on its siblings in the notoriety department. That might be why we see the Hydra as such a ubiquitous thing in modern context. And that is, of course, that it is notable for facing off against the one and only Heracles. So let's talk about the second labor of Heracles. Thankfully, Pseudo-Apollodorus gives us a full version of the myth that is pretty consistent with other versions. So at this point, I'm just expecting you to know why Heracles has labors to do, and if you don't, go check out a previous episode. A great one would be our myth section on Cerberus in Book 1, but let's dive into it. It reads, "As a second labor, he ordered him to kill the Lernaean Hydra. That creature, bred in the swamp of Lerna, used to go forth into the plain and ravage both the cattle and the country. Now the Hydra had a huge body, with 9 heads, 8 mortal, but the middle one immortal. So mounting a chariot driven by Aeolus, he came to Lerna, and having halted his horses, he discovered the Hydra on a hill beside the springs of Amymone, where was its den. By pelting it with fiery shafts, he forced it to come out. And in the act of doing so, he seized and held it fast. But the Hydra wound itself about one of his feet and clung to him. Nor could he effect anything by smashing its heads with his club, for as fast as one head was smashed, there grew up two. A huge crab also came to the help of the Hydra by biting his foot, so he killed it. And in his turn, he
Wait,
called.
hold on, pause. The big crab's there too.
You haven't heard
What?
that part of the labor of Hercules?
No, I forgot about the big crab. Why doesn't he show up anymore?
Because he died. A huge crab also came to the help of the Hydra by biting his foot, so he killed it.
Well, yeah, but I feel like they're kind of like a dynamic duo. Why do we only see the Hydra in these retellings?
Great question. Anyhow,
Anyways,
so he killed it, and in his turn called for help on Iolus, who, by setting fire to a piece of the neighboring wood and burning the roots of the heads with the brands, prevented them from sprouting. Having thus got the better of the sprouting heads, he chopped off the immortal head and buried it, and put a heavy rock on it, beside the road that leads through Lerna to Elias. But the body of the Hydra he split up and dipped his arrows in the gall. However, Eurystheus said that this labor should not be reckoned among the 10, because he had not got the better of the Hydra by himself, but with the help of Iolus. By the way, the crab is consistent with other versions. That's like, there's always a crab.
there's always the
Heracles.
big crab.
Yes, Heracles goes, he tries to fight the Hydra, the crab shows up, it bites his foot, he kills the crab. Every version.
That's fucking awesome. Dude, justice for the big crab.
I know, right? In fact, if there's one detail that actually does face some inconsistency, it's the number of heads. So, 9 is definitely the most common number, and it actually seems that in every version of the story where Heracles is fighting the Hydra, it does seem to be very consistently 9, but other sources list as many as 50 or even 100 heads.
Damn.
Not that it's particularly relevant, given this is the version that Heracles is fighting. And finally, there is one other detail that I wouldn't say is an inconsistency more than something that Pseudo-Apollodorus just chooses to leave out, and that's the role of Athena in the story. You might have caught it earlier, but even as early as the Theogony, it is in fact Athena in her role as protectress of heroes who is credited with giving them the knowledge of how to defeat the Hydra. See this quote from Pseudo-Hyginus, which says, "Under Minerva's instructions, he killed her, disemboweled her, and dipped his arrows in her gall. And so whatever later he hit with his arrows did not escape death. And later he himself perished in Phrygia from the same cause." So, you just heard, Heracles dipped his arrows in the Hydra. Specifically, he was dipping his arrows in the Hydra's venom. These venom-dipped arrows will go on to play an incredibly major role in the story of Heracles. He uses them to defeat not only Geryon, that's the guy with the stinky stables that he needs to clean, but also the dragon of the Hesperides that guards the Golden Fleece. And, as was stated in that short passage from Pseudo-Hyginus, these arrows will even be used to defeat Heracles himself. And also Chiron, but, that's less impressive. So,
Neat.
those are stories for another day. We'll come back to those.
Mm-hmm.
What are stories for today is actually a quick little etymology section before I wrap this one up. Because a listener of the show actually reached out to me with this fact, and so I checked it out and verified it, and it was really cool, so I thought I would share it with all of you. Our modern word, toxic, has its origins in the Greek root for the word bow, toxon, which at face value seems very odd until you realize that this story was so prevalent where they were constantly talking about poisoned arrows, which the ancient Greek word for would have been toxikon, that when the Romans were adopting much of this to their language, Latin, they eventually used the word for poison as toxicum, which has stuck around through Latin roots to our modern day language. And that's why the word toxic gets its origins from the Greek root word for bow.
Huh. Very cool. Thank you, listener. If you guys have any more fun facts, please send them our way. I love stuff like that.
Absolutely. But that is our myths for today, nicely rounded. But don't leave yet.
Hark! Listen
I'm
here,
ready.
Oracle Man. All right. You've had a lot of time to talk about these myths and shit that may or may not have happened, and a lot of stuff that didn't happen, and pseudo Apollodorus, whatever. All right. This book has actual history shit in it. And I will say, very graciously to you, Connor, it was your idea. We thought it would be fun. You know what? On top of the myths, I'll also explain some of the history that's talked about in this book. This will be the first segment of not Notes from the Oracle, but Ramblings from Cabin 6. Now, I want to make one thing abundantly clear, and you will hear me say this many times. I am not a historian. One of my undergrad majors was in history, and I have taken a few history courses at the graduate level in my current program, but I would never deign to call myself an actual historian. At my heart, I am an academic, and I read a lot of stuff. I know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. So, everything I say, please take it with a grain of salt. Do your own research. Do not take it as fact. Read a book. It'll do you wonders. Connor, the American Civil War. When you hear that, what do you think of?
Oh, dude, I think of bloody battles in Central America. I think of the first time that people discovered cannons and like properly used guns and shit. I always remember it based on the fact that it was the bloodiest war in American history. And I have unfortunately had the displeasure of seeing the actual photos, because it was one where we could get actual photos of battlefields just littered with fucking corpses. And it's horrifying.
Yeah. So you hit on a couple of things there. You, once again, proving you have approximate knowledge of so many things, and that's
Yes.
awesome. You strike me as somebody, and correct me if I'm wrong, that learned about this stuff in middle school and high school, and after that, really didn't come up again. Didn't really look into it,
Correct.
didn't really think about it. And I think that's most people. And I, because of that, am going to not only dig into today's topic, the ironclad, but I'm also going to build some context around it.
Ooh.
And part of that comes from what was the American Civil War? So you mentioned a lot of things, some of which were outright incorrect, some of which
Yes.
were tangentially correct, but they all kind of went around a couple of things. One, brutality. You're 100% right. It is the bloodiest war in American history because, technically speaking, everybody that fought in it is counted as an American. So there's that.
Hooray!
There was a lot of new technology. We're going to put a pin in that. And a lot happened during it, which I know sounds so like, duh, of course. But Connor, how long do you think the Civil War was? Where all of these horrid things occurred, where a nation fractured into itself. How long did it last?
I honestly, I have no idea. My gut instinct was 5 to 10 years.
Okay. That is not a bad guess, but it is incorrect. It lasted about 4 years.
Oh, okay.
April 12th, 1861 to April 9th, 1865 is the generally agreed upon time range. So it technically, I think, a little less than 4 years. Which also means, because this book deals with Confederates, that the Confederacy lasted about 4 years. And that is important to keep in mind.
Take that, losers.
Now, they're a bunch of fucking losers. We're going to get that out of the way, and we'll get to that later as well. There is a lot that can be said about this particular war, and a lot of different lenses that we can view it from. And every microcosm of its brutality and innovation could be turned into its very own podcast. And there are people who are far smarter and far more dedicated that have given themselves to study it. This is to say, there is a lot to say, which means that there is also a lot that will remain unsaid. Not because it is not important, but because we quite literally do not have the time. So, for the purposes of today, we are going to view this through the lens that this was a war of many firsts. So, what is the first of the first? Well, chiefly, the American Civil War could be argued, and often is argued, to be the first modern war. It was highly industrialized. It saw the implementation of new technologies for the war effort on both sides, for the Union and the Confederacy. Things like telecommunications with the telegraph, railroads being utilized, recon balloons, photography, and of course, today's topic of interest, the ironclad. But once again, as is often goes with history, before we talk about the thing that is of interest, we've got to talk about more preamble and context.
Woo! How does it feel,
There
Jack?
was
Now you get to do the
it's
preamble.
oh, it's wonderful. It's my favorite part. Something to keep in mind. Throughout the Civil War, there was a Union blockade on the Confederacy, and it extended over the land, but it also, a big part of it was a naval blockade. Now, I want you to consider what the Confederate states used as their chief mode of economic gain,
Yeah.
which is the exporting of slave farmed cotton.
Yep.
Can you guess why would a blockade be bad for them? Specifically, a naval blockade.
Can't export to European buyers or other buyers, and also can't import more slaves.
So, half right. I'll give you 75%
As
right.
usual. Woo!
They didn't need to import more slaves. At that point, the slave economy was entirely self-sufficient on itself, and the breeding and buying of slaves within the continental United States. So that was
is
not necessary.
horrifying.
Oh, it's awful.
Yep.
However, you are right. They can't import or export anything. It is economic strangulation. And this is part of what is known as the Anaconda Plan, which was the Union strategy, which was developed by the General-in-Chief, Winfield Scott, early on in the war in 1861 to effectively defeat the Confederacy by crippling its economy. The plan aimed to blockade southern ports, as well as control the Mississippi River so it could bisect the South in two, cutting it off from itself and to, like an anaconda, squeeze the Confederacy into submission while mitigating bloodshed.
Damn, they even had a cool name for it?
They sure did.
That's crazy. That's all.
I know, man.
We've lost tact.
I know we need more cool names for horrifying things, right? So there's this naval blockade, part of a larger blockade. And you might be thinking, damn, well, a naval blockade, or how much water did it cover? It covered the entire coast of the Confederacy. But the Union did not have ships to link side by side with each other. They were just basically touring blocks. Multiple tens, if not hundreds of miles, basically, where it's like controlling this little area. Now, did that mean that ships from the Confederacy or other nations could slip through? Absolutely, it could. And that did happen. But the blockade was a major pillar of Union wartime strategy to force Confederate submission. It also just occurred to me, there are some listeners that are not from the United States that might not know, the Union is the North, the Confederacy is the South. Just putting that out there.
That is important information. Also, in case you weren't aware, because that is a very good point, the North is the people who were abolishing slavery, and the South are the people who kept it.
Effectively, yeah. Again, we're painting in broad strokes. It was about slavery. There were people that wanted to keep it. There were people that said, we're not going to let you keep it. So it goes. But this blockade, huge point, it was a gamble for Abraham Lincoln, who was the president of the United States of the Union, because his whole goal politically was to claim that the Confederacy were insurrectionists, that they were members of the nation that were trying to rise up against the actual sovereignty, rather than members of their own sovereign nation, which the Confederacy were claiming. And this is where the blockade gets weird, because under international law, a naval blockade could only occur between different sovereignties. But that is a story for another time. The blockade is important. And therefore, the Navy was important. And unfortunately, there were a lot of leaders that didn't want to admit that. a lot of people were understandably fixated on the land war, gaining ground. Who the fuck cared about gaining water, right? But if the Confederates could break through the Union's blockade, it would severely hamper a very important arm of the Union strategy. And so, when a silver bullet seemingly arrives, a massive leap in capabilities that completely disrupt a status quo, people will jump at the chance to use it and commodify it. Now enters the ironclad.
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo.
The ironclad that is referenced in Percy Jackson, The Sea of Monsters, is the CSS Birmingham. It is not real. It is entirely fabricated. Unless Rick knows something that nobody else does, that ship never existed. However, it seems to be an amalgamation of different ironclads. Ironclads, because they were very experimental, had kind of different looks, but you could tell it's an ironclad by looking at it. But they were trying a bunch of different stuff. So this, I think, is supposed to be the CSS Birmingham, is supposed to be like a ubiquitous version of an
Okay.
ironclad. So for those of you that want images to go along with it, you could look at the front of the book. But for real life versions, I'd recommend looking at the CSS Albemarle and the CSS Richmond for kind of similar visuals. That's the kind of cannons that it would have. That is the shape that it would generally have. That is the kind of deck that it would have. This is what was rolling up in the swamp that blew up the Hydra.
That is a weird fucking boat.
It's bizarre looking, right? But that doesn't help explain, like, what is an ironclad? What makes an ironclad an ironclad? And the book describes it pretty well. They are warships that are, who would have thought, clad in iron. They actually were not invented necessarily in the 1860s when the Civil War was taking place, but they were starting to get pieced together as technology was growing over the last couple decades. So there were steam-powered warships by the mid-1840s, and there were also warships that had iron on them. But to be an ironclad, generally speaking, there are three main characteristics that you need. One is a metal-skinned hull, two is steam propulsion, and three is a main armament of guns capable of firing explosive shells. If you've only got two of them, can't really call it an ironclad. If you've only got one, you definitely can't. If you got all three, maybe you got an ironclad. And when you put it all together, these aren't some half-step improvement on technology. This is a massive leap forward in naval capabilities. So, the first use of ironclads in combat was in the United States, the American Civil War. First place in the world in which they were used to fight. The US Navy at the time had no ironclads when the war actually originally broke out. Its most powerful ships that they had were several unarmored but steam-powered frigates, which was very customary of the time. And since the majority of the Navy remained loyal to the Union, the Confederacy were basically left with scraps. And so they were seeking to, hey, what is this silver bullet we could use? Oh, we need to acquire the most modern armored ships around. So in early 1861, the Confederate Congress took a few $1 million and sought to purchase ironclads from overseas. And eventually, in July and August of 1861, the Confederacy also started work on construction and converting of wooden ships into ironclad. So this was really an arms race that the Confederacy started because they had nothing to build off of. They're like, we can't catch up to what they have. We need to just have a few things that they don't that will be better. On October 12th, 1861, the CSS Manassas became the first ironclad to enter combat. And this is where we see the sheer fucking destructive power of these things. When they fought Union warships on the Mississippi during the Battle of the Head of Passes, it just fucking dominated. And then in February of 1862, a much larger ironclad, the CSS Virginia, joined the Confederate Navy, having been rebuilt on the hull of the USS Merrimack, which was a huge fuck you to the Union, and was totally outfitted. They're like, all right, this worked really well before. We got to start rolling these out. We'll use whatever we have or whatever we steal.
Mm-hmm.
From seeing how effective these were, and I have some quotes later on that will really outline how well these worked in terms of turning wooden hulled ships obsolete. But just
Mm-hmm.
know right now, people are looking and saying, damn, we got to get some of those. And so the Union, having far more of a strong industrial base, started to complete their own ironclad gunboats and actually worked with a couple of international inventors as well, including a Swedish inventor named John Ericsson, to create the USS Monitor, which had a swivel turret design on top. We're going to talk about the USS Monitor a little bit later. The point being, there's a lot of experimentation. No two really look the same at this point. And the Union recognized the importance of building these large armored ships, these Ironsides, these ironclads, to not be outclassed by what few the Confederacy had. So in March 8th, 1862, the Confederates' first ironclad ship, the CSS Virginia, just outright destroys 2 wooden-hulled U.S. warships at Hampton Roads. Now, those of you that are history buffs, specifically when it comes to the American Civil War, will surely have heard of the battle at Hampton Roads. And that is because this is the first time we get not only an ironclad in combat generally, but 2 ironclads fighting each other. As the CSS Virginia is there, again, March 8th, just as a reminder, and is starting to tear through these wooden-hulled warships, there's a quote from a sailor that was aboard the USS Cumberland, which was one of those wooden-hulled warships. He says, none of our shots did appear to have any effect on her. It just wasn't doing anything. Those big fuck-off cannons that Clarice was using to blow up the Hydra, 32 pounds of pure fucking iron, not working, bouncing off the hull.
God, that's scary.
So this raised a problem because
Yeah.
you hear that their cannon and gunfire is ineffective. If you know this and you say, we need to scuttle our own ironclad to push back this Confederate ironclad, but our guns don't work on it, how do you wage battle against one another?
Bigger guns or espionage, right?
You're thinking a little too smart and a little too complicated. We don't have time for espionage.
Okay.
And we might not be able to fit a bigger gun on this boat. It's already built.
Run them out of fuel?
No, but a good idea and might be part of a strategy. Let me make it easy for you, Connor. You ram the absolute fuck out of each other as hard as you can.
You mean to tell me that they were playing bumper boats during the Civil War?
They were playing bumper boats, Connor. They were just fucking smashing each other together like they were 2 fucking action figures.
All right.
So they've got these awesome boats that are really, really strong and really powerful and awesome against leveling these wooden hulls, but they can't attack one another with their guns, so they just start fucking Tokyo drifting and running into each other. And
They're
this
just 2
happens
immovable
for
objects.
literally. It is literally a battle of juggernauts. So the next day comes around, March 9th, and this is when the Union sends out and scuttles its own ironclad, the USS Monitor, to protect the Union's wooden fleet from the ironclad ram and other Confederate warships that were following as well. Now, Connor, something that I've neglected to mention.
Mm-hmm.
Battle of Hampton Roads. Very, very important.
Yes.
If you're looking at where Hampton Roads is on a map, you would know that that is a very important port. And if the Confederates were able to break through Hampton Roads, that means that they have broken the blockade. And it also means that they could have a pretty straight shot up to DC,
Oh.
which would be really bad. This is perhaps the most important part of the Union's blockade. So the Confederacy, against all odds, with this new metallic beast, is starting to tear through one of the most important joints in this blockade. And the Union has their experimental ironclad that they've just got to test by sending it out right now. And thus, we reach the second day of the Battle of Hampton Roads. The two ironclads keep ramming each other, shells keep bouncing off of their armor, and I'm curious, Connor, how do you think this ends?
My instinct said stalemate. I'm settling on stalemate.
You have great instincts, Connor. It is genuinely considered to be a tactical stalemate. Neither the Union's USS Monitor or the Confederacy's CSS Virginia could sink the other. They couldn't do it! They were just too good!
Based on everything you said, I was like, I can't foresee one of these being able to do anything to the other.
But that means that even though it might have been a tactical stalemate for that specific battle, it was a victory for the Union because the blockade could hold. Huge deal.
Yeah.
They didn't have to win, they just had to draw.
Yeah.
And they did.
Them out of their hair.
And this battle attracted the attention of the world, at the very least the Western world, and made it clear that wooden warships are out of date, with the ironclads easily destroying whatever wooden warships were out there until the Union's USS Monitor arrived and fought Virginia to a draw. These ships made of wood are effectively worthless now, except for battles on the high seas. But what happens when an ironclad gets close? What if it's a coastal battle? What if they're attacking a port? What if they're attacking a city? You're screwed. And after this battle, a Union sailor remarked specifically that John Bull, who is like Great Britain's Uncle Sam, will have to build a new navy after this. Great Britain was the naval powerhouse of the world at this point, and they recognize that this is now not a battle of quantity, it is quality. And after this, only after a few weeks of news traveling across the Atlantic, Great Britain canceled construction of all wooden ships.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
It's a brave new world and a new era that they are in. And the ironclad ushered it in single-handedly. Now, notably, the first fleet and ocean battles of ironclad ships would not occur during the American Civil War. But still, the power and potential of this new age of naval engineering happened there. And the rest of the war would see much of the same ironclad battles. Some would sink, many would come to a stalemate, many would tear through wooden ships until an ironclad was able to come and back them up, and the blockade was able to hold. And spoiler, in no small part because of this blockade, both by land, but also very notably by sea, the Confederacy fell. Now, there's so much more I could share. I mean, this is so deep of a topic. Just ironclads themselves. There's so much we could talk about. So many different battles and quotes from sailors and how it reverberated and impacted the world. I want to take a break from talking for right now. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Does this spark anything in you? What are you feeling hearing this?
Honestly, I think the part that is most interesting to me is I remember frequently hearing, and I'm sure it was misinformation, that the Confederacy basically had no navy, which does seem to make sense roughly, given what you've said, why that would be the misinformation I've been fed. I am a little bit flabbergasted, though not surprised in retrospect, that it was actually the Confederates that created the first ironclad. Just, it doesn't seem like, given their economic struggle, they're the bad guys, so I don't like them and I'm implicitly biased, that they would be the ones to invent it. But when you do phrase it and put it in context of, like, they needed something, it makes a lot of sense that that would be the place from which the ironclad comes as innovation. Honestly, I'm just fascinated. So, for all of you, I gave this prompt to Jack on the assumption that CSS Birmingham was a real ship. And Jack very quickly said, Connor, this is not a real ship. And I said, okay, can you do something anyway? And he said, absolutely. I didn't think you would take it the direction of the importance of the ironclad and its development during the Civil War. That's fascinating. It makes sense that it had to have been invented sometime, and wartime inventions happen during wartime. So, of course, it makes sense that you would invent a military ship during the Civil War. But I guess I had just never put that together. I just kind of assumed it was one of those things that they started making boats out of metal via industrialization around that time, and not that it was specifically a wartime thing.
Yeah. Strife breeds a lot of things, but one of the things that it breeds is ingenuity.
Mm-hmm.
And what is war but a lot of strife and people backed
Yeah.
into corners and willing to try and do anything to succeed.
Yeah, to get the upper hand. No, this is genuinely fascinating.
It is. I am so glad. I am so glad that you find this fascinating and understand the importance of it. And hopefully it was at least more interesting than some of your boring classes in like high school. I feel like the biggest disservice that some teachers can do to history is not be excited when talking about it, because this stuff is genuinely really cool. And if I may, Connor, if I may,
Please.
I am going to step on a soapbox. For about a minute, I am going to editorialize. And as I step onto this soapbox, I am also going to paint with some broad strokes. So forgive me. But I do feel compelled to make a final statement as we're about to close out the first ramblings from Cabin 6 segment, particularly given that, I may have a few more of these throughout the book. And some of them, I'm sure, are also going to deal with the American Civil War and the Confederacy and other things from history that are not good. I fear that some people are drawn to learning history, not because of how it can impact their lives now, but because it has an appearance of layers of separation. Because it happened then and not now. These people are dead and we are alive. The technology is obsolete and we are advanced. But that misses the point of historical study entirely, in my view. And how apt for this book, there is a mythologizing of history that happens, I think, because of this perceived separation. And there's a certain romance in the stories, maybe even a gloriotide with it. Yet that ironically does a disservice to the truth that is found within it. So I will be the first to say, be excited about history, but don't deify it. And I don't doubt that as I waxed poetic about the Confederacy and their limitations and their ability to use their ingenuity in times of their strife and being backed against the wall, that some people listening may have felt a spark of sympathy, maybe even some pride at the Confederacy's advancement or success, perhaps, against the odds. Heavy air quotes, against the odds. But I want to make one thing clear. We are under no obligation to venerate the dead. Mortality does not suddenly entitle people to respect. And to this point, the autopsied corpse of the Confederacy is not some underdog who fought valiantly against the bully of the American government. Confederates are often, I view them, they're kind of like potential man. They're the definition of potential man. There's a lot of, well, if they had X, then, they would have been able to do Y. Because amateur historians or pop historians love a counterfactual. Well, what if this happened? And what if that happened? And what if they did this? And what if they did that? I mean, they really were a lot better than the Union in a lot of ways. They had the better strategists. They had the better grit and wherewithal. And if they had these resources and that, blah, 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 blah. The fact of the matter is, the Confederacy was a damned coalition of independently selfish men who, at the expense of their poor and uneducated populaces, which even then, ignorance is a very poor excuse for malice, sought to continue their subjugation over a race of people in the name of economic gain and white supremacy. It's tragic from every angle. There's no romance there. These are not laudable people or people who deserve your respect, but sad men who sought to perpetuate pain and evil in the name of capital gain and maintaining their personal power. So don't get it twisted. Every war is inherently waged at the expense of human life. But if the Confederates were victorious, their brutality would not have ceased once the rifles were put down and the ironclads went back to dock. It would have only persisted in the form of slavery. And the Confederacy lasted 4 pitiful years. Yet the embers of their hatred and their ignorance still burn very brightly today. And that is in large part because of a couple things that we've actually talked at length about in this book series, which is appeasement of bad actors and complacency from those who think they're in power. Make no mistake, if a way of life can only be preserved through the torment of another, if you think your happiness can only be secured from the submission of others, then you are not only dangerously misguided, but you are a blight on all that is good. Now, obviously, none of this alleviates the Union or the antebellum US or the current US from its many sins. Far from it. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But the imperfection of one does not negate the evils of another, and vice versa. History is not purposeless storytelling. It is not dead, static images that we get to gawk at. It is the intimate study of humanity itself in the experience of us. It's ours. And this is why I personally struggle with military history. Because even though it's cool and it's fun to talk about the stats and the battle and the scales and overcoming the odds or defying the narrative, whatever, it has a propensity to turn people into lines on a battle map and numbers as statistics for casualties. So this is all to say, please, let's not lose the plot here. I have fun sharing all of these very trivial facts with you, but this is not a comprehensive course on what matters. Be curious, be engaged, be open. I am stepping off of my soapbox.
That was phenomenal.
Thank you.
I will add but one thing that Jack was establishing, but not saying directly. History is cyclical. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. Welcome to the repeat cycle. It's happening. So, Jack, I agree with everything you said. And to those of you at home, please do look at your history. See what is happening outside in your world. You will be unhappy if you are surprised.
But with that said, we have more myths, we have more history, we have more fun in the future. Sorry to ruin the mood. And to bring it back to the book, this was a really good chapter, Connor.
It was.
This was really good. And I am, perhaps undercutting what I just said, I am excited to see what my historian buddy Rick does with these Confederate troops and how he addresses them, how he utilizes them. I think it might be quite telling. And I think it is quite telling that it's Clarice that is using these.
Mm-hmm. I will say, and I understand perhaps why they made this choice, given that their target audience is children, because this really dips into the making the show for adults territory. But given that they have a person of color playing Clarice in the show, I kind of don't love that they take away the idea that her soldiers on her boat were Confederates, because I think it presented an opportunity to have a really nuanced and unfortunately sad, unpleasant conversation in a popular piece of media. And they opted not to do that. And I understand that choice, but there was definitely some room there. Perhaps we will see it explored in the next chapter. There is but one way to find out, and we are excited to continue this book. So, with that being said, I suppose we will have to wait until next time to find out what it is exactly that Clarice blows up.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to support our content, please be sure to leave a review, share with your friends, and follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, this has been Notes from the Oracle. Dude, that was phenomenal. Props to you.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed you taking it the angle of the innovation of the ironclad, mostly because I didn't know any of that shit, and therefore learning it was really interesting. But also, I felt like it kept it very, hey, we're talking about this one itty bitty little corner here.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, man, I get it. Some of these myths are huge. Like, I couldn't be like, let's talk about the whole Odyssey. I was like, no, we're going to talk about the one page that the windbag is on, motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, I totally get it. You carved out a niche and stuck to it.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried my best. I had a blast putting this together. There's a lot of stuff here that I'm sure at one time I knew more about and just forgot. And there was some stuff here that I'm sure I just never knew. Like, I definitely knew about the Battle of the Head of Passes. I knew about the Battle of Hampton Roads, but there's so much more that I didn't quite understand, or maybe I didn't contextualize when I learned about ironclads initially. I just took it as, oh, look at how they innovated. What a neat innovation. But like, they were pretty integral in some very key ways. And I feel like the reason that they're not talked about more is because they did their job so well that, like, if the Union just said, we'll be fine, the war, still, the Confederacy would have lost. I fully believe that.
Yeah.
It would have dragged on a lot longer, but there would be a lot more emphasis on the Confederate Navy and how this leap in technology shattered through what was supposed to be a vice grip that the Union had.
Yeah. No, man, I thought the detail about the fact that England had to fully cease the building of wooden ships because it had fundamentally changed the landscape of war at sea so dramatically really went to show, like, this was a huge deal. I can't even imagine, like, passenger ships these days being made of wood or of anything other than metal, really. Like, yeah, it's wild to think how big of an innovation it was at the time. Because you mentioned the stalemates, and it's like, I'm sure people aren't talking about stalemates very often because they're fucking boring, so to speak.
Boring.
Yeah, to go back to exactly what you were just saying about, like, it's just about numbers, and it's like, what, like 6 people died? No biggie. And it's like, no, 6 people died, but, that's not going to get as talked about in history classes even. And so it's just wild to think that, like, no, those stalemates were very important, and they were demonstrating the certainty that having an ironclad on the battlefield seemed to provide in those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, a very important aspect of history, but, military history, that I think is maybe underappreciated is the importance of holding the line.
Yeah.
You just hold. It's not glamorous at all. It's definitely not glorious either, but some of the most important and pivotal moments, or I guess maybe even prevention of pivotal moments when it comes to wars or battles or entire civilizations, is just the ability to hold the line.
Yeah, man. I believe it. No, that was interesting. And I also feel like I know you said it was the riffier part of your notes. I thought you made some really good points. And I consistently hope that if there's one thing that this podcast accomplishes, it is making people realize that history is not that different from now in the grand scheme of things. Right? Like, there are times that that I've looked at myths and been like, how incredibly human. Like, the windbag.
We just talked about a time where Odysseus is like, I'm going home. And then the idiots around him fucked it up. And the first thing he did when he realized how fucked he was said, I think I just gotta kill myself.
Yeah. Like, how many times have you just been online and seen somebody like, "Minor inconvenience, Imma kill myself."
Yeah.
Odysseus was so heavily inconvenienced, and I in so many ways, I think, like, the more human part of it is he's like, "Ugh, I should just end it. No, I
I
will remain among the living."
Yeah, it just grit my teeth and bear it. You've mentioned a couple of times, actually, that Odysseus is a very Jack-coded character.
Yeah.
That that resonated.
I thought it might. Again, there were some lines in this one that I was like, "Oh, I have to include this bit." Like, Jack needs to read Odysseus going, "Alright, am I gonna fucking kill myself now?"
Yeah. Not today. Gonna grit my teeth and bear it. Still gotta get home. Gotta get home.
Yep.
Yeah.
God,
Oh man.
that's it. It's so important to look back and be like, people have absolutely advanced. I do believe that in the last 3,000 years, natural selection has caused people to evolve slightly, but evolution takes a long time, and you are not that fucking different from somebody who existed 100 years ago or even 3,000 years ago.
Yeah, maybe societal evolution. Obviously, we're not living in the exact same like structure as 3,000 years ago, but people are people no matter how far back you look. And it's the great equalizer. There is a comfort and a bit of a terror that comes from knowing that things were not always this way, but also things won't always be this way.
Yeah. I truly mean it when I say that, like, doing this podcast and because I've always loved mythology, but looking at it so consistently and with the lens of, like, I need to present this in a way that is educational and correct has meant that
Uh-huh.
I've been a lot more scrutinous. And it's led me to constantly see, like, over and over again, things change, people are the same. And that's fascinating. Like, and I've talked about it at length on this podcast, so I won't belabor it, but just the fact that even, like, these stories still resonate with us
Mhm.
is indicative of that, right? Like, the fact that people are like, Epic the Musical came out fucking last year. People are still remaking the Odyssey. Christopher Nolan's making an Odyssey movie. Like, clearly these stories are still relevant to people, and
Mhm.
in the same way, in some ways, like, I know it was all fact, but your story of the Confederacy building these ships is in that same way relevant as it's like, no, we just need to know history. We need to be aware of what this means and acknowledge that horrible things have happened and they're gonna keep happening because that is unfortunately in many ways human nature.
Yep. Yeah, the problems and the answers are already they're all out there. We don't exactly have to like do much guesswork with it. It's just a matter of do we have enough people that recognize that and want to act upon it to actually change shit. Which
Yeah.
unfortunately, part of the sad part of history is you're right. Those who know history are doomed to repeat it because of a bunch of other people that don't know their fucking history.
Yeah. Well, hey, consider this my call to action for all of you at home. Clench your teeth, stay among the living. We appreciate you, and we see that you are doing your part to fight the darkness.